Hello and welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time with us, then welcome to you as well. Now this is the second installment of a series that I've been working on, which focuses on small businesses and how to deal with unplanned business disruptions as a result of natural disasters and cybercrime. Now in this episode, we'll be taking a deeper dive into how cybercrime impacts even the smallest of businesses. I'll be offering you some additional suggestions on how to prepare your small business to deal with cybercrime. This episode will really focus today on the following key challenges that so many small businesses have when it comes to cybersecurity. We'll talk about funding and resource constraints, challenges related to business growing pains, cybersecurity awareness and training, understanding and identifying phishing attacks, yes, I said phishing, defending against malware such as ransomware, for example, the negative impacts of human error. That's a really big one, and I'm going to take some time and really talk about that with you all as well. Now, I will also have links to everything we discussed today in the show notes, as well as links to some of the research sites that I went to pull some of the numbers I'm going to share with you today. So let's get going. All right, let's go through some stats here. Globally, roughly 30,000 websites are hacked each and every day. 64% of companies worldwide have experienced at least one form of a cyber attack. And these are companies of all sizes. There were some 22 billion records that were breached in 2021 alone. Also in 2021, ransomware, which is a topic we're going to cover a bit more in depth later on in this episode, ransomware cases grew by 92.7%. And every 39 seconds, there's a new cyber attack somewhere out on the internet. An average of around 24,000 malicious mobile apps are blocked daily on the internet. And 300,000 new pieces of malware are created each and every day. So as you can see, the frequency of cyber attacks is on the increase, and things aren't going to get any better, which is even more reason as a small business owner, you really want to start focusing on positioning your small business to defend itself against cyber attacks. Okay, so let's jump into a topic that I think the vast majority of us know all so well, and that's antivirus software. Now, believe it or not, antivirus software has both a great deal of advantages as well as some disadvantages. And I'm going to touch on a few of these right here in my table. So let's look on the advantages side. So advantage number one is that, and these are in no particular order, but antivirus software, what it does is it essentially scans the programs and other files on your computer, on your device, and it compares them to known computer virus signatures. Antivirus also offers protection against untrustworthy websites that illegally try to take your credit card data or any other type of personally identifiable data. So be wary of those. Antivirus software can help flag those sites for you. There are also, in terms of advantages, both paid and unpaid versions of antivirus software that's out there. Usually the vendors who offer antivirus software offer it either as a paid subscription or some type of perpetual license. And in some cases, they even offer you kind of a free version, which may be a bit limited. But take a look at all of it, because even the free versions of it offer you a good deal of protection. And usually there's a list that they'll provide you with kind of that lets you compare the difference between the paid version and the free versions. You definitely want to review that. Now on the disadvantages, I don't know if I want to be as hard as saying disadvantages, but these are some things you need to be aware of. Some downsides, if you will. More advanced black hat hackers, so these black hat hackers are the folks who are trying to, they're the cyber criminals, essentially. They've devised ways to implement malicious code, what's called malicious code insertion attacks, into your environment in a way that subverts your antivirus software. So your antivirus software, it can't detect everything. And these hackers are becoming increasingly sophisticated in the way that they go into, or the way that they gain access to your environments and the type of code that they insert into your environment. So another disadvantage is many antivirus programs do tend to use a good deal of computer memory and storage. The scanning process, for example, can eat up a lot of your CPU, your central processing unit, resources. So if you've got an Intel Inside processor, or you're running an AMD or whatever, the antivirus software, once it kicks off those scans, it could actually slow your computer down. So be aware of that. And third, if your antivirus software encounters an unknown threat, right? So we talked about that as one of the first disadvantages there. If it encounters an unknown threat, it just won't be able to flag that file or program as infected with a virus, right? So be aware of that. There are advantages, but antivirus software isn't perfect. And secondly, antivirus software on its own is simply not going to be enough from a cybersecurity standpoint. So what I've done here is come up with, I guess, for the tech of it, minimum recommendation in terms of technologies you seriously want to consider using. And the good news is that some combination of these three technologies may already exist on your existing computer. So for example, antivirus software. I know that Microsoft Windows 10 and 11 actually has antivirus software included. It's called Microsoft Defender. It's pretty good. So you don't actually have to go out and buy a separate antivirus solution for Microsoft Windows. Not sure about the Mac. I don't think the Mac really has anything, and Linux doesn't have anything by default. But there are, again, free as well as paid antivirus solutions that you can get for Mac OS and for Linux. So for you folks out there who are using Macs, if you are aware of, because I'm not aware of it, if you know that the Mac OS includes some type of antivirus software, please put that in the comments below. Secondly is firewall, right? Software firewalls, I think all operating systems pretty much include software firewalls, all desktop operating systems. Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, they have software firewalls, but there are also hardware firewalls. And we'll cover this one in more detail in a future episode. But if we look over to the advantages side here of a firewall, firewalls promote privacy while you're online. They have strong prevention from hacking attempts. Firewalls prevent viruses from spreading across your network. Firewalls defend against spyware attacks and other forms of malware. And firewalls are used to monitor and control network traffic. So what comes into your network and what goes out. Again, we'll talk more about firewalls in a future episode. And then third, another technology you want to consider is what's called VPN, or Virtual Private Network. And what a VPN does is it essentially hides your online identity, which allows you to browse the internet anonymously. So by default, when you get on your web browser and you start browsing the internet, there is metadata or data about you that is transmitted to your ISP, your internet service provider, as well as, if, let's say you're using a search engine like Google. There's information that Google, as well as other search engines, not only Google, that these search engines collect about you so that they'll know how to advertise to you. And they can sell that data, if they so choose to do so, to other companies who can advertise to you. VPNs help to hide your online identity to make your searches look more anonymous. VPNs also encrypt your data and routes your data through what's called a secure network tunnel, and it reaches other VPN servers in different places around the globe. So there are a number of different companies out there who sell VPN software. So these are the three technologies that I recommend you take a look at and use on your devices. Okay, so let's dive into our common cybersecurity weaknesses for small businesses. So I'll cover each one of these in detail, but let's go through the list right quick. Insufficient funding and resources, that's a pretty common one. Unprepared for growth, lack of cybersecurity awareness and training, identifying phishing attacks, defending against malware attacks, the rise of ransomware attacks, and mitigating human error. One of the key takeaways, and I'm going to repeat this a few times in this episode, is small businesses are not immune to cyber attacks. So don't think that your business is too small to not be an interesting target to a cyber terrorist. Okay, so let's dive into the first one here, insufficient funding. Now, lack of funding is certainly one of the main reasons that small businesses are unable to successfully defend themselves against a cyber attack. If you think about this on the other side of that coin, if your small business is attacked and any critical or sensitive information, let's say for customers, vendors, or what have you, is exposed, the remediation costs for your business could be so expensive that it could put you out of business. You could fall under subject of lawsuits or what have you. Legal action could be taken against your small business in the event of a successful cyber attack where sensitive data is leaked. Think about that for a minute. Now, the National Cybersecurity Alliance has stated that each year, 20% of small businesses are successfully targeted, and 60% of those who've been targeted ended up having to close their doors for good within 6 months of that attack. I go back to that remediation cost and potential lawsuits, litigation that you have to go through. So I'm going to repeat this second to last paragraph a few times. You've got to make sure you conduct a risk assessment, implement a written cybersecurity policy for your company, as well as create a business continuity plan to help your business to survive a disaster like this, as well as a natural disaster. How do you recover from that? If you want to know more about risk assessments and these policies, business continuity planning, take a look at the previous episode of mine, and I'll include the link in the show notes, where I go into a bit more detail about those. And finally, another related issue is that in many cases, small business owners don't really know how to invest in cybersecurity safeguards because in many cases, they just don't have the expertise in that area. And this is where you want to perhaps seek a third-party consultant with that experience who can come in and assist you. As desirable as it is to see your business grow, well, with that level of growth comes some undesirable side effects that you also have to deal with. As your company gets bigger and bigger, your computing and data demands are also going to grow along with that. Sometime it outpaces it. And as such, it's important for you to go back to evaluating your risk assessment because your risks could have changed. You want to revisit at least annually your business continuity plans. And again, I talk about this in my previous episode. And make sure that your written cybersecurity policy that you put into place Determine whether or not that needs to be updated. If it's good enough, you leave it as is. If not, you make whatever changes are necessary. And you also look at those cybersecurity technologies that you've put into place, right? We talked about, as part of cybersecurity policy, you also need to invest in cyber. Make sure that those technologies are scaling to meet the level of growth that you're seeing in your business. Cybersecurity is not a situation where you can just set it and forget it. Because, again, as your company changes, so does your level of risk. Now, in terms of lack of cybersecurity training and awareness, I have 3 really easy steps here, things that you want to consider. Definitely you want to invest in cybersecurity training for you and your staff. It helps you to identify signs of a potential cyber threat. You want to establish that cybersecurity mindset within your organization. And thirdly, you definitely want to create that written cybersecurity policy and make that available and visible to your employees and contractors. And again, this is an area where outsourcing to a professional cybersecurity consultant is going to be really beneficial for you. All right, so phishing attacks. These things are rampant. Phishing attacks are by far the most common type of cyber attack that smaller businesses have to deal with. It's not just small businesses, but mainly small businesses fall victim to this. Approximately 90% of all data breaches are due to phishing attacks. And phishing attacks are by far the most simple and most effective form of what's called social engineering attack that exists. Now, what are they? So with a phishing attack, the attacker sends out some type of fraudulent communications. Mostly it's email. However, when the email is received, it looks like it comes from a reputable source. It looks like it comes from one of your suppliers or a customer of yours, or worse yet, somebody in your organization. And again, it's usually done through email. And its purpose is to steal sensitive information like usernames and passwords to get access to different systems that may be in your environment, bank account and credit card information. We talked about in an earlier slide how cyber attacks, the real cost behind the cyber attacks obviously is the sensitive information that's lost or stolen because of the attack, but the remediation costs are also what get you. So imagine the damage that a successful phishing attack could have on your company. If they were able to gain access to sensitive customer data or even sensitive data where you have intellectual property, and that intellectual property information gets out into the public, you could lose your competitive advantage. Phishing attacks are primarily conducted for monetary gain. So next up is malware. What exactly is malware? Malware is pretty much any type of software that is designed to cause harm to a computer, a mobile device, your network, any type of infrastructure, the data on your network, or what have you. The good news is that antivirus software, firewalls, and even though I don't have it up here, VPNs are all great defenses against malware attacks. They're not perfect, but they are very good. And if you use different combinations of those technologies, it'll go a long way in helping to prevent malware attacks from harming any of your systems. Now, in terms of ransomware, ransomware is a type of malware. The way ransomware works, once ransomware infects a computer, And the way it does it is, once it gets on your network or onto your computer, it begins to, there's a little program that'll run, and it'll start encrypting all your files. Once your files are encrypted, the ransomware then holds the needed decryption key for ransom until you, the victim, pays the cyber terrorists money. Typically they ask for Bitcoin, but until you pay them, they will not unlock your encrypted files. I'm going to go back to this, and I told you I'd say this over and over. This is another reason why you need to have a business continuity plan along with a disaster recovery plan, which I talk about where? In my previous episode. So take a look at that. Now, in recent years, we've heard news stories, about municipal governments, school systems, healthcare providers, other various private companies, all being victims of ransomware attacks. A ransomware attack against a small business would likely strike that fatal blow to that business, forcing it to close its doors for good. So as you recall earlier, some of the statistics that I was putting out there, I think it said something like 60% of the small businesses who come under attack end up having to close their doors for good 6 months after the attack occurred. Don't let that be you, folks. All right, so now we're going into the biggie here. What is pretty much the topmost cybersecurity threat that small businesses face? And that has to do with just basic human error. We're human beings. We make mistakes. Mistakes happen. But if we look here, according to a 2022 Digital Information World Global Risk Report, 95% of the cybersecurity-related breaches are because of human error. Now, there are generally two types of human error, and this I pulled from an article from Hacker News. There's skills-based human error and decision-based. And really the distinction between the two really has to do with the skills-based being more of a lapse in judgment, or not so much judgment, but a small mistake that happens when an individual is performing a routine task, something that they do, day to day or what have you. And as it states here in these scenarios, the end user knows what the correct course of action is, but fails to do so due to a temporary lapse, mistake, or just negligence. This also can be attributed to the person being tired after a long day, long week, or what have you. They're not paying attention. There could be other things happening around them that require them to focus on those other things, thus overlooking an important step in the process that they were working on. So they kind of forget about it. We get busy. The other is decision-based. Now this one is really focused more on the user not really having the necessary level of knowledge or not having enough information about a specific use case or circumstance. They're making a decision that could be a bad decision, but they're unaware of the fact that it could be a bad decision because, here's an example, lack of proper training could be a good reason for that, right? So we're talking about cybersecurity. One of the items we talked about is people needing to be trained to look for what a potential cyber attack looks like. If they're not trained properly, they could make a judgment call or a decision to do something or even not do something, because inaction could be just as bad as taking an action. So that's something that, as business owners, you need to be aware of. People get tired, tasks are routine, people need a break from time to time, too many things, too many irons on their plate, they're not properly trained on a particular process, and then it could be a combination of both. They're real busy working on something they are trained about. Something else comes up that requires their attention that they're not properly trained about, but they need to make a decision on, or they decide not to make a decision, and it causes a cybersecurity incident to occur. Okay, so some final thoughts. Cybercrime continues to increase. Your business, no matter its size, is not immune to cybercrime. Security through obscurity is no longer effective, not that it ever truly was. Make cybersecurity one of your top investment goals. Plan. Remember we talked about business continuity planning? If you want to learn more about that, take a look at my previous episode. Talk to your supply chain partners, your vendors, your customers, etc., about their cybersecurity policies and procedures. Make sure that you aren't exposed through them and vice versa. Remember, it's a partnership. And educate yourself and your personnel, contractors, employees, what have you, on cybersecurity. And it is true that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You want to plan ahead for these types of disasters, not only natural disasters, but cybersecurity disasters. All it takes is one time, folks. One time to be exposed, and that could shut your doors for good. All right, so for the next episode, we're going to cover the following topics. I'm going to take a deeper dive into firewalls and help you better understand the importance of firewalls and how they work and the benefits of using them beyond what I covered today. We're going to also talk about what's called a zero trust network architecture. That's going to be a pretty interesting topic, so stay tuned for that one. And of course, there'll be other cyber-related topics. So that's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. That really helps me to know that the topics that I'm covering here on this channel are you find to be helpful and beneficial. So until this next episode, peace.